paraphrase Glenn Gould, when we already have perfect recordings of these great pieces preserved for all of eternity, what is it that we hope to bring to it? What is it that we hope to achieve? My answer to that in making this transcription was in the approach, and specifically to bring it more into the realm of a cello. I'm Diego from De Oro Music. Thanks for joining me. Let's get into it. There's some very good versions out there that I recommend you check out. Pablo Casal's possibly my favorite in his interpretation. Yo-Yo Ma has some gorgeous interpretations of it, and several of them recorded. And then also Rostropovich. And you'll find a little different approach in all of those, so I think it's good to check them all out. To represent the nature of a cello, the things that we can do on the guitar is to play more of the inner strings, less open strings, and also a combination of, rather than an arpeggiated approach, we could do it more as a single line run. So for example, if we look at measure 10, you could use some light rest stroke there. But compare that, if we play that in the inner strings in that way, in a scalar type run, as opposed to a campanella approach, or more of an arpeggiated approach. It's quite beautiful, but doesn't sound like a cello. So I opted more, in some places, for the cello approach, and in other places, we'll approach it more like that guitar, very guitaristic campanella. I mentioned the rest stroke, but especially applying that to the thumb, and this might be something that some players are not as comfortable with. So I suggest using this piece to really work on that. We can look at, for example, measure 33. Rest stroke thumb there. Or, for example, second half of measure 14. Also, we can use articulation to imitate bowing. So think of when a cellist is bowing the notes individually, the attack that you hear on each note. In this intro, for example, you'll see if you watch cellists, the ones I saw anyways, would bow each note individually. So to give them a little bit more of the individual attack of each note, you might play it closer to the bridge or add a little bit of a staccato. So there you can hear. You don't have to do it on everyone, but just think of that. And the opposite of that would be where a cellist would bow the entire phrase with a single movement. So that's more in something like, here we do campanella. Like that type of effect. So just considering those, keep those in mind, and it's just a different approach, and I think that can help really represent the piece in a true fashion. When it comes to phrasing this piece, I think it can be effectively done without over-romanticizing the piece in terms of stretching the time too much. We can use other devices. So for example, we can use the echoing of the repeated figures. We can use a change in the tone of those repeated figures or volume. In measure 15, for example. And then also looking for the conversational aspect that unfolds in the piece as well. If we look at measure 25. So there's sort of a statement and then an answering phrase. Another one. An answer. So looking for those types of things to delineate the phrasing rather than being overly schmaltzy, which I don't think works, for example. just too much. It loses its momentum and it becomes confusing as to, where's that pulse. So I think keeping that pulse established is important. It's Bach. It's important in Bach, in all music really, especially Bach and Spanish. Where we can take our liberties in time, there are some places in the piece when you come to, for example, obviously that's a break. We're heading into a new section after that. So there we're going to take some time. But generally in the other areas, try to make use of some rubato more than anything else. So if we look at that opening, for example, so I had in the first two bars, entering a new section, so I bring some in there. And I would keep it subtle and really choose your moments. Try to think of it as, okay, what are my 6 big moments in this piece? And use some rubato to delineate those. And another thing that we see that we can utilize when we're approaching our phrasing is we have some large sections, these large internal structures that are happening. For example, if we take it from measure 33, and try to have an overall shape to them. So here I'm going to crescendo and then diminuendo. Now starting double P, crescendo. Bring it to a double F, for example. So just trying to approach it from a larger structure, and it helps give it an overarching sense of direction. So the challenges in this piece are phrasing with tone and articulation, not over-relying on tempo effects. And then also the tone production, especially in the basses, because you'll see this arrangement has a lot of wound strings that we're playing. So when you're playing those with the fingers, just be aware that if you're getting a scratchy sound, what you can do to remedy that is to bring your nails a little bit more so that they're parallel with the string. So rather than approaching them going across the nail before you release, just turn a little bit so that you have a release point, or sorry, you make contact with the string closer to the release point, or at least they don't travel as far off of the nail. So it's this sort of thing versus this sort of thing. And that can also give a little bit more body to the attack of the note. And then especially when it comes to the thumb and rest stroke thumb, that, if that's new to you, you might need to do a little bit of experimentation. So experiment with the plane of the nail crossing the string. So what I mean by that is this kind of experiment with this. So whether it's here or here, I wouldn't take it from this angle. That gets scratchy. But I do find that if you have it from this angle, it tends to work a little bit better. And you can just experiment with it. You hear that gets a little thin. There's kind of a sweet spot there. And the rest stroke, of course, you're going to bring that thumb right to rest on the next string. And there will be times where you bring it right, just let it fall through. Okay, a lot of rest stroke in there. Now let's put those ideas together, doing a slow playthrough of the piece. So a little rubato to begin. Little articulation there. Did rubato on the first two, but now I'm going to do this one straight. Echo effects. Moving to a new section, little rubato. Back into our original octave. Now here, put that bar down, even though we don't need the full bar for this part, it's smoother. If we put that down to string 5, we can keep that whole section flowing better. Echo effect. Now here, to control these basses, once we go into the single line, notice that I'm going to mute my basses with my thumb. So again, see how that came down. Now holding this bar down, letting the arpeggio grow. And build it as we go down. So we start out strong and then drop it down and grow and rit till we land there. Now we've landed. This is the beginning of our next bar. This section, we're going to drop it back down and then build that to the end of that section too. So we landed here. Those are our echo effects. It. Till there. Now we bring it back down. And again, building that bass, building the volume of that bass as we descend. And landing here, to get a nice vibrato there, get your other fingers in place. So land with like that. So especially these two in place, because then I can get my vibrato going and continue the chord arpeggio that's coming, the line. Little echo. And one of our few real rits, because we've come to the end of a section there. And so now in the next section, starting out soft and then growing it to the end of this line, the single note line. Combination free stroke, rest stroke to begin. See, I started free and into rest stroke. And arriving there, nice vibrato on there. And you can see how I'm sort of walking my fingers around this. Now thumb, bar. Into this conversational. Slide that up, and now. So here what I'm doing is this little trill effect. I, M, M. And just continuing on. Watch your bass line. Land here and then soft. And growing it to the end again. So there's the same kind of treatment of those bass lines. That's all rest stroke thumb. Now we enter this nice campanella section. Hold this bass. Hold that bass. Watch what I do there to accommodate what's coming up, okay? So take note of the fingering here. So again, 3, 2, 2 slides up. Now we're in rest stroke thumb. 4, 4. Add the bass. Echo. Now a little build. Rest stroke thumb. Warm it up. Try to use articulation more than milking the time here. Now here, little change in character. Again, articulation to define the line. And then now building. Thirds. Crescendoing, counterpoint. When we get to here, I think the trick is two things. One, as we're building this, to keep that smooth, keep your common fingers, which is in this case finger 4, and also the thumb resting through so that I'm right in place for this next chord. And don't bounce your hand away. Snap your fingers in. And then also when we roll this chord, because we've arrived at this high point now, watch that it doesn't get too thin. You don't go too much off of the tips of your fingers. Still, you know, right side of your nail, whatever side of the nail you play from, left side or right side, make sure that you're traveling across that length of nail. Bringing those fingers into the hand, not sort of rolling them or straightening, because that tone, keep that nice and thick. I think that's a challenge to play that strong, but also keep that tone thick there, you know, to be double forte, but still have a nice roundness to the sound. So work on that. Now when we come to this part, really treating that melody. Da, 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 da. So for example, free, free, rest, free, free, rest, free, free, rest. Now we change to the A finger. Make sure that you keep it the same as your M finger in terms of tone. Rest, add the bass. Now, again, finishing this last chord with some power, but also some body. So I'm using my thumb. And it's hard to get that rich sound out of your thumb, especially bring that melody out. But I think the key is when you go across the strings, not to just let the weight of your arm come down. You see I'm going on a diagonal there. But rather to bring it in this direction so that we still have a nice warm sound by the time we finish. We're not too close to the bridge. And then also experiment with your thumb angle, because that will make a big difference as well. It's a beautiful piece. Good luck with it. If you'd like to see more on this prelude, including slow play along and behind the scenes preparation, check out my Patreon, De Oro Guitar Academy. You can find sheet music there and also at deoromusic.com. Thanks for watching. See you in the next.